Sorry. Okay. All right, with that out of the way, welcome to the grand final of Help University Asian Secondary School Online English Debate Challenge 2022. In this final, we have CIS PFMN-J on government side and CLPHS on opposition side. Congratulations to both teams for making this far. Before we begin, we'll have some short introduction of the judges and the teams. My name is Haika Daniel and I will be chairing the final. I have no preferred gender pronouns. You may refer me as the panel. I'm here with 8 panelists and I would like to invite my panelists to introduce themselves in the order of the draw.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'll be your panel, no preferred pronouns. Good luck for the round.
Hi, this is Audrey. I have no preferred gender pronouns. Good luck and congratulations for making it to the finals.
Hi, this is Banner, no preference, and good luck to both teams.
Hi, this is Claire. She, they. Good luck, everyone.
I go by he, they. Congratulations and all the very best.
Hello, I'm Milan. I have no gender preference.
Hi everyone, my name is Narayan. I'll be your judge. No preference for that.
Hey everyone, this is Priyanshi. I'll be the judge for this round. Good luck.
Thank you. I would like to invite both teams to introduce themselves and their preferred gender pronouns, starting with the governments.
Hi, my name is Eric. I prefer he, him pronouns and verbal POIs during my speech.
Hello, I'm Alex, second speaker proposition. I prefer he, him pronouns, and I would like POIs to be verbal, please. Thank you.
I am Dominic. I'm Gov. I would prefer he, him pronouns and verbal POIs. Thank you.
Opposition side.
Hi, my name is Chloe. My preferred gender pronouns are she, her, and I prefer verbal POIs. I go with as LO this round. Thank you.
All right, second opposition, Wayne, he, they, audible POIs. Good luck to everyone.
Hi, my name is Korsing. I'm going with she, her pronouns, audible POIs. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Just a few reminders before we begin. Make sure to time yourself and refer to the speakers with their preferred gender pronouns and be respectful to each other. With that said, debating on the motion as an average, reasonable person, this house prefers to live without ever forming strong emotional attachment to anything. For example, relationship, jobs, human, pet, etc. I would like to call upon Prime Minister to open up the debate. Here.
Okay, I'm assuming I'm audible. I just spoke, yeah.
Yep, you're audible.
Okay. My speech starts in 3, 2, 1. As an average reasonable person like you or I, we want more happiness overall. Whether this comes from emotional or material objects, we want more, longer, and consistent happiness in our lifetimes. That is why when you are in this position, we find it essential that you would want to and prefer to live in a world without ever forming any strong emotional attachments. What does strong emotional attachments mean in today's debate, in the context of today's debate? We think it means several things. Firstly, we think that if this is different from just regular emotional attachment, we think what separates a strong emotional attachment from a regular emotional attachment is that it is part of who you are. It is part of your core. It is part of and a building block of your human character. And that is what differentiates a regular strong emotional attachment than a regular one. A stronger one would be able to influence your daily decisions. A stronger one would be able to influence a large variety of your life. And we think that's what generally separates it. So then if you were an average reasonable person in this scenario, in this new world, you would have every strong emotional attachment resort to and downgrade into a regular emotional attachment where you can still have empathy, where you can still have basic connection, where you can still like and dislike things, like I like technology, like my phone, but you don't have that strong emotional attachment that comes with it. That is the context of today's debate that we're debating in. Now, what I have for you panel today is 3 arguments. Firstly, on a principle about being yourself and not letting others define you. Secondly, about having a more stable life in general and why that's more preferable. And thirdly, about the improvements and how people can actually live their lives better under our rules. Firstly, why is it so important to not let others define you, and why does this happen under side opposition? We think that, firstly, how strong and how can emotional attachments define you? We think there are 3 ways they can do that. Firstly, when it comes to self-worth. So when you have strong emotional attachments with the people around you, and when they judge you for different actions, like for example, if you were a kid of a Christian family and you came out to them and they reject you, that defines your self-worth, right? Because you have a strong emotional attachment to your family, them rejecting you physically would destroy your self-worth because of that strong emotional attachment yourself, right? So this would result in you not wanting to come out again or rejecting your identity because of that strong emotional attachment. The second thing, second example and a situation where emotional attachment can define you is in perceptions of issues. So for example, this looks at how you perceive current events. So, and where when you have strong emotional attachments, like friends and families, those can cloud your opinion on these sort of perceptions. And because of that, that might affect your morality, who you are, and define you more as a character. Thirdly, when it comes to strong emotional attachments, they can also cloud your overall judgment and rationality. Because when you act under strong emotions, you don't usually do the best decisions possible. And if that's a fact, and because of that, you don't do the best you don't become the best version of yourself, and you limit your maximized potential. Why should this not be encouragement, right? Because we think that all three of these scenarios show something that can be detrimental to human individuals when they form a strong emotional attachment to yourself, to other things or other people. When you do form that, you are susceptible to changing parts of yourself that you otherwise not change because of the fact that you indirectly form an attachment to them. And we think that is so regrettable, right? We think that people as a whole should try to be as true to themselves as possible, should not let other people affect you unless it's something egregious as so. And like, we think that those small building blocks are what defines you possible, and that should not be affected by attachment at all. By this alone, we win. But moreover, let's talk about why when you do have this strong emotional attachment, and you won't be able to live a more stable life. There are a few premises that I want to build off here. Firstly, on the fact that loss is inevitable, right? For example, it doesn't even have to be human. It can be objects that you lose out on importance or things. Loss is inevitable, right? Whenever it comes to death, and therefore, when you do have strong emotional attachments to things that you lose, you feel a lot of emotion off that, right? Secondly, I want to tell you about instability, right? Because when you have strong emotional attachments to things around you, when you do feel those sort of loss effects or even happiness effects, those create a large amount of mood swings. So imagine like a sine graph in math, right? So you have a lot of instability, and we think that this only causes to more instability in your life that is unpreferable. Why is it unpreferable? Right? Because we think that when you do have a sort of large mood swings of happiness and then great sadness, we think that what happens is that you largely, as human beings, we feel loss much more than we feel happiness. We feel sad emotions, we feel negative emotions much more than happier or positive emotion as well. That's human nature, and that's like a core tenet in behavioral economics. Societal opposition cannot defend it, cannot reject this, right? So then because of that, when we do feel loss more, even though we have strong happiness as well, then that loss is exacerbated and damaging to our human psyche, right? We're going to make bad decisions under those sort of loss with decisions, and we think that is regrettable, right? More like, and talking about comparative, we think stable emotions are better as well, because you don't feel this sort of large swing back. You don't feel tired of this large mood directions that you have, and because of that, you are more generally positive as a human being because you don't feel that immense loss. Two, you're not as tired of your emotions because of the fact that you have less strong emotional attachment to it, and therefore we think that you live a more stable life under side propositions world. But lastly, how can people actually live their lives better disregarding mental and mental health wise, right? Because we think there are lots of rational effects and practical effects that can also happen. Namely, firstly, we believe that it just causes you to be more rational and more efficient, like I mentioned previously. I told you previously about how when you have strong attachment, you tend to cloud judgment. So then the exact opposite happens when you don't have strong emotional attachments, right? You're able to make more rational decisions in the moment because you don't feel and don't tend towards one way already. You don't already feel like you want to give up on this job because you hate it. Instead, you analyze to see what the cost benefit analysis that can cause you, while also taking in some emotions as well, right? We think that is the most rational and that's the best way to live, because of the fact that you're able to make the best decisions possible without the strong emotional attachment. Secondly, we think that because of the fact you're not being affected by others, as we said, you can be more like yourself. You don't have to be affected by others. And we think that by that merit alone, you're going to live a much happier life, and B, as a reflection of this happiness, you're going to live a much more productive life where you feel like you want to do more things. Three, we think there's going to be a trickle down effect from you as well, right? Because when events happen in your life, they severely affect you, and therefore, because you get affected, other people below you also get affected. So when you have friends, you are going through a bad phase right now because your boss is determining whether to fire you or not, you tend an opposition's world because of the strong emotional attachment. You then transfer this aggression towards your friends. You have more of a chance on opposition side of the house to lose the people you care about the most. On the outside, we don't have that because of the fact that you can't trickle down like that. Because of all of this, because it's principally and it's better for yourself to do this. Secondly, because it leads to a more stable life. Lastly, because it makes your life better. I have never been prouder to propose.
Thank you for that fine speech. Now let's call upon leaders of opposition to open up the case on opposition side. Here.
All right, just give me a second. Sorry. Okay, just a reminder. I prefer global POIs and my preferred gender pronouns are she, her. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think that strong emotional connection or attachment towards things are the foundations of who we are as humans, right? It actualizes and maximizes your ability to do things and pursue what you want because we have those kind of emotional connections and attachments. And all of these are premised upon the connections that we establish, therefore very proud to oppose. Before I move on to my rebuttals, a few pieces of case setup. Firstly, what is the comparative? What is the counterfactual that we support side of opposition, and what does it look like? It looks like preferring to live in a world where people do form strong emotional attachment to things, for example, a person, a relationship, etc., etc. So a few mitigations here. Number one, we think that there are existing and very accessible support structures for people. So for example, when you feel very desperate, very sad, very disappointed, you can always post on social media or access to things like psychology, psychiatrists, or therapy to elevate your sufferings. And cost is not an issue because as people start to release the importance of it, you will have things like free consultancy online, which is more accessible and is also a trend to show that what is likely to be accessible to you as an individual. And you have things like your friends, your family, your community, all of them who are accessible to you as a support structure to mitigate all your extreme emotions, right? And without that, another piece of important framing here is that most people don't feel strong emotions very frequently on a daily basis. It's only a once in a while thing. So because if you feel it every day, it's just the same. There's no value to it. We think that you only feel strong emotions or connections only on important events, and this is good because of the memories that you are able to create which enrich your life, right? So what is the comparative on the side of government, right? Because on their world, we think that it's a world in the absence of strong emotions because you don't feel any strong connections. They can feel emotions like happy, sad, angry, but not to the extent in which you will feel these things are a necessity. You go day to day without having anything important to you. Your relationships, jobs, etc. are just things that you can easily give up on side government. But the difference here is that you feel you have a significantly less attachment on your side. Therefore, you are likely to be unbothered by a lot of things in your life. For example, you don't feel that sad if you lose a pet, or you don't really care about your performance in your job because it's not your passion, etc. And the attachment on our side enables you to connect with things emotionally. And these are things that are likely to play a big part in your life. So now, done with the setup, a few rebuttals to side government. First of all, they say that emotions fluctuate from time to time and it's just unstable on our side of the house. A few responses to this. Number one, we think that yes, emotions can fluctuate. You feel sad or happy sometimes, but we tell you that it's okay because we think that it's just a cycle. Because sometimes you feel sad, but after some time when you achieve something or you do something that you feel good about, you feel happy. Therefore, these emotions compensate each other. Therefore, it's not a harm to a very great extent. But moreover, we tell you that stability exists under both sides because of number one, we think that daily life has nothing to be felt upon because most individuals don't feel strong emotions on a daily basis, and number two, because of all the mitigations we have already told you in our setup, like why support structures exist. Number two, we tell you about in terms of self-improvement, we think that people just don't feel that arrogant because of the emotions itself. Because we tell you that sometimes when you fail, you feel sad and disappointed, but when you succeed, you feel happy. You feel happy about what you have achieved, and so about what you have fulfilled in your life, right? We think that these are things that are necessary as to you as an individual because we think that this enables self-improvement. Secondly, they told us about rational decisions, right? But it's just very unclear as to why this is better because even if you want to talk about the principle of the truth, we think that it's just very subjective to every single individual because it just varies, it's subjective, and it's unclear as to why being rational is true. Because we tell you that if you want to be rational, you only evaluate it based on utility, but we tell you that utility is not always good because of things like child labor. It might be utilitarian good, but it's not good to the children, etc. And we think that it's you will only be able to evaluate whether it's good or bad subjectively on our side. So now moving on to my arguments. Why do we get a better life on the side of opposition? So why is the strong emotions and attachments a prerequisite to accessing more avenues of happiness and meaning in life? A few layers to this. Number one, in terms of emotions itself, who are the foundations of who we are as a humans. So number one, the ability for you to fall in love, to feel attached with someone. The constant ability to be able to feel affection for someone is a process that instills a lot of meaning in you. The moment when you feel like your heart is touched, or the feeling of being able to deeply connect with someone and feel their heartbeats echoes to you. In the absence of strong emotions or attachments, you do not feel all of this. Even if you feel heartbreaks when your partner leaves or whatsoever, we think that it's still a very valuable experience to live with because you are able to learn how to deal with a heartbreak. The second layer, the ability for you to be happy. Once you establish connections with people and things in your life, you are likely to value and care about them because you feel happy when during your first birthday because you want to celebrate it with them. You feel happy when you perform well in your job or get a promotion, but you won't feel this way if you don't have any sort of connection to anything. Even if you might experience heartbreaks or be emotional at times, it's okay because you need to feel sad in order to appreciate the happiness of you happy. The extent to which you feel happy is dictated by to the extent by which you feel sad. Because if you are emotionless in general, you don't feel sad, but you don't feel happy as well. Also, the fact that you are afraid of heartbreaks, that means to say you are more likely going to cherish the people around you. You're likely to be aware to not harm them emotionally. So the outcome of this, we think that emotional maturity expands over time as your character develops better and better. On the third layer, the ability for you to be fulfilled because of the strong emotions is what that pushes you to do things otherwise you wouldn't do because you wouldn't have things like motivation or the feeling of importance or underside of government. Because for things like traveling, it comes with cost. But we think that it's the strong emotions and attachment. Like we really want to go to visit some place that drives you to do these kind of things, to experience different things. Right? You won't feel the need to travel to pursue a hobby because when you get no gratification or whatsoever inside a government. So also the desire of achievement, right, which pushes you to work harder. Because when you don't feel any form of emotional attachment, you don't feel the need to try harder, like finding a job you like. Only if you feel passionate towards a thing, you are likely to work harder for it. And also the capacity for you to store memories. Because if you think about it, the important memories are constructed upon strong emotions, and that's why you remember them. Under their side, everything is monotonous and everything is literally the same. They have no important memories or happy memories that are able to construct it on their side. So lastly, why are these important to individuals? Because all of these things add meaning to your life. Your ability to self-actualize or seek gratification or live a contented life is contingent upon these things. Therefore, we tell you that your life is better off when you feel happy because you are able to pursue your dreams and passion, have meaning connections to people, and in general, you feel better about yourself. Very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. Now I would like to call upon Deputy Prime Minister here.
Checking if I'm audible.
Yep, you're audible and visible.
First. All right, just a reminder, he, him pronouns and verbal POIs, please. Opposition needs to see this debate with a bit more depth. Happiness is not equal to sadness. Happiness and sadness happen at different degrees. They are different in nature. They are not polar opposites. Why does this matter? This matters because opposition has tried to come up here and run a case talking about how happiness is dependent on feeling sadness, how happiness is something that is going to make you feel fulfillment. Judge, I think that what you need to understand is that the two things don't work like this. I'm going to quite clearly explain this to you today through my rebuttals. Then I'm going to go on a bit and flip this a bit and talk about personal character development, right? Look, Judge, first of all, they come up here and they tell us about how strong emotions are something that you feel only once in a while. Judge, to be quite clear, this is a characterization that we reject, right? We think that when people are emotionally invested into something, deeply so, we think that this means that every little change, every little threat to their sort of emotional attachment is something that they perceive, right? We think that it's something that they hinge lots of their life on. They base much of their life around and they feel greatly towards. We think that therefore this means that this is something that they will be extremely perceptive to. The slightest change is something that could cause the greatest swing in emotions. We think this is entirely the case, and we think it's entirely possible for people to be feeling these sorts of emotions on a regular basis and not just once a week, once a month, even as opposition is wishing to suggest, right? Then they suggest then that emotions are something that can fluctuate, and this is something that's justified, and they go into more of this about the substantive later, right? Let me just allude back to the one thing that my proposition's first speaker said, which you think is quite important, right? And it's that the idea that this is something that impedes the progress of a person. It's something that impedes their ability to be able to do the right thing, to be able to be efficient in life, instead wishing to get caught up and commanded by their emotions on these sorts of things that aren't as productive. This is something that we believe to inherently be causing an explicit harm to the people on their side of the house, right? Second of all, though, they talk about how happiness is something that can arguably compensate for sadness. Judge, I don't think this is something that you can believe, right? Because happiness and sadness are different in nature. Happiness is an emotion you get when you feel fulfilled by something, when you feel happy, when you feel like you're happy about something, when you feel when you feel good about something, when it fits you, right? Judge, we think that this is something that leads to further emotional sort of consideration. Instead, though, we think that sadness is caused by things like loss. Sadness is caused by things like hurt, like the breaking of trust, etc. All these sorts of things that are inherently packaged with great emotional attraction, right? We think that then, when this is the sort of thing, we think that sadness is something that is different from happiness because it's something that people tend to mull over. It's something that people tend to reflect over because mistakes have been made, etc. It's something that people change their lives based on. I'll talk a bit more about why this is something that's so bad later, right? We think that then they also talk about this thing about how they think that it's unclear why rationality is something that's not necessarily a better thing. To be clear, Judge, we think that rationality is important because it's what commands people's choices in life. It's not just the daily choices about whether you want to have a bagel or a waffle for breakfast in the morning. It's also about the choices on whether you want to go, whether you want to have a baby or not. These are sort of big choices that can be swayed by mood that we think is not good to have when your mood is constantly going all over the place. We prefer that sort of emotional consistency on our side of the house, right? But let's look at the substantive really quick. They give, first of all, this idea that people are defined by emotions, that their personalities are reliant on having these sorts of emotional attachments, right? We think that the problem with this is that it's far more complex than this. They suggest that having sadness, having heartbreak, having loss is something that will eventually lead to character development. We don't think this can happen necessarily, right? Because as I've described to you, there's a nature to sadness. Sadness is something that is inherently reflective, but at the same time, we think it's something that's incredibly complex. We think there are many factors that go into an event that happens. We think that some people tend to see themselves as victims, others tend to see themselves as heroes. This affects the way in which people react to these sorts of situations when they're emotional, sometimes it leads to them being reflective in a way that's self-destructive, overly so when it's unnecessary. Additionally, it also possibly leads to scenarios where people aren't repenting when it's necessary. See, Judge, we think that this isn't the sort of situation that we are happy with because of the complexity. We think that when people are being defined by their losses like this, that is extremely inherently problematic. I would be happy to take a POI if there is one. Seeing as there are no POIs, I will continue with my speech, right? Look, they tell us next that happiness is something that's defined by sadness, that sadness is something you need in order to feel happiness. That is, you need to know the bad in order to know the good. Judge, I don't think that this is necessarily the case, right? You see, Judge, I think that there's something called mediocre. There's something called in the middle. There's something called daily emotion. This means that when you get something that is good, you're able to differentiate that from status quo, and you're able to see that as something is good. For example, right, you are able, and additionally, right, as a second layer of argumentation, right, we think that you don't necessarily need to have a great emotional attachment in order to have that sort of small fluctuation in emotion that we see as completely acceptable. Notice on our side of the house that we're telling you that big fluctuations of hard emotions are not a big deal. However, we're telling you that sort of like daily ups and downs aren't necessarily problematic. What I mean by that is, for example, in the morning when you have a waffle with syrup that you really like, that's something that makes you happy because that's a food you like. But then you go to lunch and you have a really dry pork chop, that's something that makes you sad. Clearly, there are ways for you to be able to sort of have this sort of like ups and downs that are meager and acceptable in your life. We think that quite clearly that's something that we encourage on our side of the house, but not to the extent that they're completely swaying your mood and affecting your rationality. We think we've quite clearly showed to you how that's different on both sides of the house, right? Last of all, I just want to discuss a bit about this idea of personal character development, right? As I've described, we think that people learn inherently a lot from reflection. People define themselves on past experiences. People grow from these past experiences. The only problem is, though, people often do so after they are in the status quo. People are often only doing this after they have a strong emotional attachment, which has led to them feeling a certain way, because it's something they care about, because it's something that they felt that they lost. We think that inherently this leads to people leading to these situations being the ones that are the most common for people to be reflecting over, to be growing over, right? We think that as a result, people make the mistake of often defining and basing who their future selves should be off of these highly emotional, off of these irrational situations where they're not able to specifically consider what the stakes are, specifically consider who is at fault, all of these sorts of things. When people aren't able to do this, then at these super critical junctions in life where they decide what kind of person they need to be in the future, if they're doing so based off of emotional attachment, based off of this sort of irrationality, then we think that is where they are that is where they're going to be being the most detrimental to themselves, and we think that is why we are so proud to propose.
Okay, for the speech, now let's call upon deputy leaders of opposition. Here.
All right, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible and visible.
All right, I'll take POIs verbally. So if you have any POIs, just ask directly. All right, speech starting in 3, 2, 1. On both sides of the house, stability is granted. The reason for it is simple, because the daily monotony of getting to school or attending your job, etc., does not allow your emotions to fluctuate that much as what proposition says it is today. There are reasons as why this is true. First off, in a status quo where literally individuals still have the ability to feel strong emotions, which is the world we're defending, by the way, most individuals don't get angry all of a sudden when they're waiting for the bus to get them to school. Individuals will not suddenly be so happy while working the very same 9-to-5 job every single day. The truth here is that the avenues for it to be able to be extremely happy or extremely sad are very rare and are constrained to an extent where that's not happen every single day. What this means is that also that when people evolve over time as you constantly grow older, right? Think about it. When you're perhaps as a kid, receiving a candy makes you immensely happy. But as an adult right now, you want comparatively more. The fact here is that the gateway for it to feel strong emotions increases as your age. It also grows at a very day. What this means is that the fluctuation of emotions and the claimant of proposition is highly mitigated up to this particular 1-minute framing. A proposition is drawn out of the house. But I also want to note very important, the one very important thing about this framing, right? Because it showcases no capacity for you happy, even important events on your side of the house. Things, for example, winning a debate round. Things, for example, being able to win a debate round with your friends. Things, for example, being able to hang out with your loved ones, for example, or things that, for example, being able to date the particular ideal person you want. You eradicate all the possibilities for individuals to feel any forms of happiness in their side of the house. The reason for this is also simple. If the factor is that if dating someone that you love versus going out of a stranger is one that is literally same on their side of the house because you don't have emotional fluctuations, that makes you lose the legacy of trying to do something that means special to yourself. That is why comparatively you're less happy on their side. But second of all, on rationality, I just want to say that rationality also exists on either side of the house. Perhaps it is true at a very start of the age where still a kid, for example, and therefore you're irrational, but understand that humans always want to self-preserve on either side of the house. And understand if you're immensely irrational, you place yourself in dangerous positions. Things, for example, if you're just like, I don't know, just trying to like irrational and kill someone, for example, that literally positions yourself at a point which you're likely to get punished by the criminal justice system. That is why comparatively on either side, rationality is likely to exist, and therefore that is not a comparative benefit they can claim. But even if they have some level of increased stability and rationality on their side, I'll frame that in the evenness later. Having said, a couple of issues I want to address. First of all, on which side of the house are you better off? And second of all, on which side of the house do you garner more societal change, specifically for the vulnerables of the impoverished. First off, on which side of the house is your life better off? The first thing we're doing this issue is just refute the two broad claims coming from their side. The first thing they say is that negative emotions are likely to triumph positive emotions as a result of this. Literally, number one, I just want to point out it is a complete assertion to begin with. All they want to do is literally play around with big words and literally list philosophical examples, philosophical words, and don't have any forms of factual examples, right? The point here is that I think, but even if there is, right, but I just want to point out this is untrue because the amount of bad things that happens on both sides of the house is symmetric. But also recognize that the ability for it to always find new ways to feel happy is also symmetric, except for the fact that it's on your side. The difference is that when you try to feel happy by doing the things that make you feel happy, you feel a decreased amount of happiness, you feel a nerve version of happiness. So comparatively on our side of the house, you have more happy emotions to literally try to counterbalance the bad things that happen to you. But even if somehow that is true, the claim is true, we think that is in fact a good thing, right? Because when you're doing like an app when you're doing like an app workout, for example, that makes you want to die and extremely tired, you think about the times we're able to have ice cream. So the point here is that you make yourself to cherish the things that you have more and appreciate those good things that happen to your life even more. So the point here is this is also where we get more fulfillment in our side of the house, because we realize the ability to get fulfillment not only comes from the ability for you to accomplish something, but also the ability for you to be able to cherish whatever you have in your hands right now. We think that is comparatively more important to an average reasonable person. The second largest claim they have right here is that, but you're likely to transfer your aggression and your literally negative emotions to the people around you, so you lose very important support structures on the ground. I have 4 different reasons of why this probably isn't true. First of all, because given that life is arbitrary, if this time I was the one that is going to be fired, the next time perhaps it is you that encounter a bad thing in your life, right? So the fact here is that I can always help you back when you need it, and you help me back when I need it. It's a form of reciprocity. But second, I just want to note that there is only the fact is that you can always go to multiple different people, your friends or family. You don't have to constantly go to the same person. So it is in fact not true that all of your anger and all of disappointment is transferred and concentrated in all of your emotions into one particular individual, rather it is distributed across the board. But thirdly, I just want to note there are other forms of escapism for you to access, even if it is not trying to find a human to talk to. Things, for example, doing the things you like, right? Playing video games. Things, for example, just going on a stroll outside, or things, for example, just having like a ball bar, for example. You don't have to rely on people all the time. The fourth reason is that I'll argue other forms of support structures always exist, right? Chloe tells you about the existence of psychologists and professional help. The factor is that cost is not a concern, because people start to realize the importance of mental health issues. It is normalized to an extent where likely to decrease the cost over time. The second, altruistic means always exists for people for mental health. That is why literally we have like free consultancies nowadays in like internet, even if you have mental health issues. But lastly, even if all these things are just not true, I would argue in fact that being able to feel aggression and like lose some individuals in your life is something that is important, right? Because it allows you to distinguish between which individuals are more important in your life. If I'm telling my issues right now and you leave me, the factor is that you're less important. You allow individuals to evaluate the quality of the friends which you're able to formulate at the very end of the day. We think that is comparatively better. But lastly, even if they have more stability, alluding back to like the promise I have you, and like even if they have more stability and rationality on your side. Why is stability less important in this way? Realize when you sit down at the very end of your life, before you die and think about it, we say you simply cannot remember any important things on the other side of the house. The premise of the argument here is that strong emotions allows you to store those memories, right? Literally, if you live for 80 years of life, a lot of things will happen. You require strong emotions to signal and allow your brain to remember those key moments in your life. To think about when you were traveling to a foreign country, the form of excitement, the form of eagerness, and the form of and happiness you were able to derive from this to feel immensely happy. That is the distinguishment between the way to which you feel compared to your everyday monotonies on their side of the house. But not lastly, I just want to know that it also operates under the same characterization where your brain's capacity to absorb information that is the same. We maximize it on our side of the house. But lastly, even if it's a bad memory, you're reminded of that. You can think of how you moved on from there. So it's better for character growth as a whole. Second argument on how you literally have more progressive change on our side of the house. The premise of the argument is simple, right? You need to have empathy in order to literally push for individuals. But on your side of the house, the empathy which you feel for everything is literally the same. The empathy when you see someone suffer, the empathy when you see an animal dies, that really means you're unable to distinguish between which is more important and which you should care more towards that more. On our side of the house, you're able to have strong delineations and you're able to have strong distinguishments between what is more important and what's not. That is why when you see individuals suffer on the ground, when you see bad things like slavery, you're more not incentivized to participate in those discussions. You're more likely to stand up and protest those things as a whole. That is why society as a whole collectively is better than our side of the house. We help vulnerable individuals better, but also the weighing mechanism of this argument is simple because we'll help them with vulnerable. That is why it's a comparatively more important and that no other individuals can help them. They cannot self-help. For these reasons, we are so proud to oppose for one last time.
Thank you for that fine speech. Now let's call upon Government Whip. You're here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, you're audible and visible.
Okay, thank you. My speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Let me clarify a few things before we show why we can take all the clashes in today's debate. Number one, what we see and everyone must understand is that the concept and the idea of strong emotional attachment is simply an idea of an amplifier, right? It does not equate to the idea of feeling emotions or being human. What does this mean? This means that the actions, the feedback from others, from your environment are heightened, they're amplified, the waves look bigger, the reaction to you becomes bigger because you feel attached to them, because you feel that this matters to you, because all your emotions have been invested in something you can't really control, and yet you let it become your detriment. This is the problem with what we've seen from opposition, and this debate is completely about whether or not it is worth to adopt this mentality as an average person, and can it bring you success in life, right? So what we also have in response to different things is if you have a strong emotional attachment, right, your goal as a number one human being is to become satisfied, right? As an average person, you want to become happy. So ultimately what you see is if you have a strong emotional attachment, the smallest tweaks result again in the largest impediments of progress brought by my previous speaker, right? And what you see examples such as good feedback from your boss, right? This probably leads to more office hours, more productivity, feeling better. But the bad feedback means it's going to be much more amplified than what you would be, right? The comparative is you're going to feel much heightened aggression. You're going to feel like there's much more, you're going to feel much more sad. You're going to avoid work and basically nullifies the sort of waves and sort of peaks that they heighten. So what's the takeaway here? Number one, that life isn't a race, right? To win as an average person is you need to feel consistent happiness. You need to improve every day. And opposition simply cannot win this debate by narrowing the focus onto the peaks and valleys, because they can clearly win if they show that our side brings less happiness in the short term, but when they fail to focus on the long term, we were able to show you why we benefit the average individual overall. It's a debate of value, it's a debate of life, and they fail to acknowledge the both key rules for both of them. So what is the principle of emotional attachment, right? The principle arises, and ultimately the whole question about this on our side is it worth for you is it worth to let you be you or let others define you, right? This is the clash analysis. And we say, no, it's not right to let others attach you because of the definition of emotional attachment, right? It's a process where you exert your emotions into thinking and allowing something else you can't really control, your environment, to define you. And you shouldn't be able to do that because number one, A, it negatively impacts you, it negatively impacts others, both clashes I'll touch upon, and C, it affects your happiness, the most important thing as an individual. Why? Because by definition, again, you're more susceptible to irrationality, spontaneous impulses, but ultimately the mood swings that affect you and your surroundings even more, and it can harm and creates a harmful cycle, right? And so what we have in response is that number one, when they come up and like what we see is that emotional emotional attachment is like not just emotions, right? It's a relationship between balancing the outside's feedback and the implications about your own actions. So when they come up and talk about things such as other treatment options exist or support structures, and yet they fail to realize the main problem why these institutions exist is because those people have strong, highly heightened emotional attachments, right? That's why they go to therapy, because the downs that they felt are so high in comparison to those that feel indifferent. And this is the problem that you exacerbate on their side, and they fail to do so, right? And so what we go on is to bring not just justifying our side, but also when they bring up points about how heartbreak is okay. And we can see that feeling down, feeling sad emotionally is okay, but it's not good to purposely amplify this and let your environment determine who you are. Because deep down as average people, we all know that the lessons of pain are much less worth consistent happiness, because the number one goal of being a person is to feel happy, is to feel content and feel satisfied, even when you're 80 years old. So what do we have on the point about stakeholder, which they failed to analyze? What does an average guy or woman look like? Brought up by my speakers, but let me bring it again. You're not that rich, right? You're not that poor. You're not alone, but you're also not dating supermodels. And you, most likely very major events such as winning the lottery are not going to likely happen, right? And so what you have to do as a goal is to feel happy and to basically keep your support structure around you, not only harm your support structure, but also not harm yourself in the process. And that's why it's justified to go through our side. That's why it's not a good idea to create your own detriment by following the mentality of stronger emotional attachment. And so how can you be consistently satisfied? Because it's much better, right? Like, so how can this happen on our side? Because number one, because of all the reasons I've provided is justified. But then we move on to the point about how you're able to make you as an individual happy. And the reality is, as an average person, right, you must acknowledge the reality of the status quo. People, relationships come and go. You'll be hurt, you'll be loved, you feel both ends of a spectrum. Life is always a spectrum essentially. But when you have no strong emotional attachments, what will this look like? This looks like you're understanding self-worth. This looks like your self-confidence won't be affected by the small tweaks and comments of others, because the amplifier is no longer that big of stronger emotional attachment. This looks like you have Zen-like indifferent mentality, which is more likely to achieve sustainable happiness. Why is this, and what's the mechanism behind it? The premise is, because it's an actor debate and you're only one stakeholder, then we have the mech of comparison. When you see people around you who adopt this mentality that opposition is trying to promote, like things such as the idea of New Year's resolution, I'm going to be better next year, but then when they hit a roadblock, they feel much less motivated to do so. This is the reason why people don't have much more progress on their side, because they fail to acknowledge that they both pretty much nullify each other. If you feel more satisfied, if you feel consistently satisfied by increments every day, then you're much likely more likely to feel more content as a person, and that's why it's justified, right? The comparative on their side is you feel constantly swings. You get defined by the feedback that you see from the outside world, which you cannot control, and it's clearly destructive and unhealthy cycle, which they fail to acknowledge because they no longer are looking at the bigger picture, right? This no longer equivocates to being happy as an average person. And what is the impact of their side? You're constantly seeking approval for others. You're constantly seeking the thing that gives you the next rush of dopamine, feeling happy. And so when you can't guarantee your environment around you and you're constantly seeking for things that make you feel happy, it contradicts against the idea of life itself. What you have right now is you're promoting the philosophy of the sugar rush society, where you want to seek instant gratification. That's not what satisfies the average person. They want to keep their families happy, and they want to keep a stable job, not just the job that pays them the best for the next month and try to work their way around a volatile economy. That's simply not the way life works. So then we move on to the point about how can which side best makes you and others around you happy, right? And so I'm bring an example and the point about family. So a key source in the current status quo is, where does trauma come from? It looks like the emotionally attached parents who got a really bad day at work, and because of the amplifier, they feel a need to basically wreck something at home. They feel a need to feel unhappy and portray these sort of feelings and actions upon their children. Though it may not be ill intention. This is precisely what the philosophy of opposition promotes is likely to have. This looks like drinking from breakups. This looks like destroying your own mental health and your own well-being because of other people, because of the relationships you built, and because you value them much more than yourself. And this is the problem with what they've brought today. And so the sort of reciprocity that we see is simply not the case. What we see is an unhealthy cycle of exerting too much on other people and allowing them to control you and define you, which is simply what we've established from the very start on the grounds and the premise of what stronger emotional attachments will look like. And what's the comparative on their side, right? Number one, it's you're going to affect others negatively via emotional attachment. It's no longer to be reciprocity, and simply the case of being simply rational seems like a much better choice for me. So for all these reasons, this is why the motion should absolutely.
Thank you for that fine speech. Now let's call upon government opposition whip. Here.
Am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Let me set up my timer. I'll take POIs at 5, if possible. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. It is the ups and downs in life that make the human experience so special. It's the downs, like training every day and feeling that you haven't progressed, that make the ups, like competing in the finals, so much more special. It's only when you have strong emotional attachments that's when you make core memories that make us humans. That is why I'm very proud to oppose. I'm going to prove one thing in my speech today, which is strong emotional attachments can improve the quality of life of this reasonable person, and that the harms that fluctuating emotions on side government wants to prove isn't that actually that significant in today's debate, right? So I'll bring to you one main question in today's debate, which is, are strong emotions important or not, and whether it will affect the quality of life of this person, right? So if government makes a few claims. First, which is their main claim, which is whether on their side of the house, they are able to make rational decisions. The premise to this is that strong emotions are irrational. Number one, this is untrue because people still want self-preservation. If they feel strongly about something, they will unlikely want to mess it up. To some extent, we still have some form of mitigation to these emotions and some form of a control, because this person is a reasonable, average person who is likely it's probably going to be sensible and unlikely want to mess up things that he cares about. But understand that you don't feel strong emotions to everything. When you feel strong emotions to something, it must be very important to you for you to have a strong emotional connection to it. You're not going to make irrational decisions every day to the extent where your whole life is ruined. Side of government needs to take us at our best. But the second layer to this is, why are impacts more important? We believe that even if some decisions that you made are irrational, we believe that experiences, a valuable experience that you can learn from making these irrational mistakes, is something that you can't achieve on side government. No, thank you. If you can't grow, you have to understand that you can't grow if you live in a monotonous life where if you don't feel like something is important, you feel no urgency to change, because everything in your life is just monotonous. Everything is just the same to you. Like, you just feel no urgency because there's no any significance or importance, or you don't feel any strong emotions to actually push you to get off your chair and improve yourself. That is why our impacts are still important, because at least on outside house, when you feel these kinds of emotions, you have the urgency to change. But we believe that even if in our worst case scenario, like there are irrational decisions, we already pushed you. There are existing support structures in the status quo that can actually support you, like your families and friends. They are there to give you advice, be there for you to listen to your problems. And because we have strong emotional connections to them, you're likely to take their advice seriously. And if you're hurting them, you're likely to listen to them and change, because you feel a strong emotional connection to them. Not only because you're not only thinking rationally what's best, you actually you have emotional connection to things that you actually feel strongly about. There's also therapy when, like, if you feel depressed and you're struggling, you remember how life can still be good, and you can still have goals, and you have strong emotional attachments to maybe your girlfriend or job, so you're likely to seek out for help and like reach out to like get therapy and existing support structures. So in conclusion, even in our worst case scenario where irrational decisions are made, we already proven to you that we have mitigation factors. And number two, irrational decisions can actually build your character overall, right? But the second thing government claims is that basically we lose people that we care about the most. Yes, people under both sides of the house will lose their loved ones at some point in their lives, but the difference is the way in which people react to these things. On your side of the house, it's utterly pathetic that when you lose your loved ones, you're still trying to be rational because it's just the circle of life, right? But if you don't have any connections to anyone, you're likely only to prioritize yourself. You are just a robot who has no meaning to life. But why is it better on our side of the house? We're able to grieve more and move from these experiences eventually and have the existence of psychological, and because we have like psychological help and support structures, that harm isn't that bad. But even if you experience heartbreak in the short term, it's also okay, because you can learn to deal with these experiences because it's inevitable in life, right? We're able to identify who is important to you and not just frame everyone as the same being, and you have no significant you don't feel strongly towards any specific person. You appreciate the people whom you important in your life, and you cherish your time with them unlike just blending them into the background like side government does, right? But the last but then they tell us that you should not allow other people to define you, and that's basically like a main crux of the case. But number one is principally unjust to dictate what is and isn't important to you as an individual, because if you think that you really love and value someone, you're able to actualize your identity and derive self-gratification by interacting with them. This is important to you because you don't simply fall in love to a stranger or feel deep connections to your friends which you feel towards your family, right? It's unjust for government to say that you should cut out all connections with someone just because they don't bring you utility, right? But the second layer to this, even if you claim that people will be much more efficient on your side house, we think that the individual on your side house will not be as passionate about what they're doing, meaning you don't have a connection to a job, or perhaps you treat it as only a means to earn money because even if you earn more money, you don't feel the value of it because you're not happy in your job. On a day-to-day basis, you're likely to lose your motivation very quickly because you are repeating the mundane routine from working a 9-to-5 job. On our side of the house, the motivation and passion that we get drives you to achieve further and accomplish your goals and be more efficient, right? That is why this whole point and this whole harm is like doesn't matter in the debate. But the last thing to tell you is that happiness and sadness, happiness doesn't equal to sadness. I'm sorry, I no time. Equal to sadness. And they tell us how they still have memorable experiences, which is untrue because they're unwilling to engage with us on our daily analysis of why hardships and pain it just makes you cherish what the core moments in life looks like, right? Because on side government's world, if you win a debate tournament, you feel happy, but that's just it, right? This lifelong experience that someone may remember on our house may remember forever will blend into all the happy memories that you have on side government. Winning a debate tournament can equal to just having a good meal for breakfast to you, right? But on our world, when you depress, when you fail, you actually feel strong emotional attachments and you have the incentive to try harder. And when you finally succeed, you feel satisfied. Unlike side government where you just don't feel anything and everything is just the same, right? So why are we better in the long term? Side government's whole case is basically rational decisions, which deprives you of your ability to experience life to the fullest. But on outside house, where you feel passionate about stuff, you feel fulfillment, you feel happiness, you have core memories that are ingrained into your memories when you are sitting on your deathbed. You're not living a mundane life, but you have core memories in your life where brings like meaning into your life. And because we remember winning this tournament more on side opposition, we should win today's debate. Thank you.
Thank you for that fine speech. Now let's call upon opposition reply to conclude the case on opposition side. Here.
All right, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
All right, speech starting in 3, 2, 1. Proposition's case basically is you purposely amplify your emotions and therefore you have a lot of fluctuations that immensely harm yourself as a collective. We told that probably isn't true from the very start of our second speech. We told you we're in fact defining the status quo, but in status quo we don't see individuals literally feeling happy, extremely happy over very small events over time, and just because of that you're likely to get satisfied from this. The first thing we told you is that there are a couple of reasons for this actually we told you that all largely got uncontested with. The first thing we told is that not all individuals amplify their emotions, but second, realize not all avenues are worth being happy for, right? The monotony of your life, the jobs that you have to do every single day, the homeworks, the advanced mathematics like questions which you have to encounter every single day, those things don't bring you any forms of meaning, and those things and the repetitiveness of it destroys its ability to bring any meaning to you, right? But thirdly, we told you, in second as well, we told you the gateway to feel strong emotions evolve over time. As you grow older, we told you that your gateway for to feel strong emotions also increase. Perhaps receiving a toy as a kid makes you happy, but right now you won't, right? You won't do that, right? The fact here is that perhaps you want better career paths, for example, like better results, for example, or perhaps to win his finals. The fact here is that the capacity to get happy or to feel strong emotions evolve over time as a whole. And so what does this actually mean, right? This first means that stability is largely symmetrical on both sides of the house. The importance of the crux of the entire proposition case is framed out of the window. Having that said, let's talk about happiness. Why is happiness the most important thing in this debate? Because realize that on both sides of the house, that EPM also, that first proposition also agrees that the ultimate end goal of life is to be able to find some form of happiness and to be able to find fulfillment. So contrary, if we win this issue, we already won this debate. The factor is, why is it more attainable on the side of opposition? We explained that the contrast and the contrary of happiness and sad moments in your life, that the difference and the fluctuation of those things inevitably brings more meaning. 3 reasons why. First of all, this applies even if government whips response on how unhappy moments triumph happy moments in your life. Because understand, it allows you to feel the importance of those happy moments. That right now I'm feeling something that is happy, and contrary to my those sad moments and down moments in my life, that you illustrate and signify and then you amplify the importance of those moments as a whole. What this means, you're able to cherish those things more. But what this also means is that you make the happy moments more fulfilling at the very end of the day, on how you actively compare those happy moments to the worst times of your life, to the very bad times in your life. You're able to cherish and find more fulfillment from those instances as a result of this, right? On the other side of the house, it is also worse on the second level, because you realize you're unable to remember the key moments that brings a lot of fulfillment, or the key moments that is the most important in your life. It might be things like, for example, traveling with your partner, things, for example, going out with your friends, and the highlights in your life that generally brings more meaning. The happiness you feel when you win a tournament, the fact on your side is that the happiness you're able to feel when you win a tournament, the happiness when you feel when you hang out with the most important people in your life, is the exact same when you hang out with a stranger on their side, to which you destroy the ability to distinguish between the unimportant and the important events in life as a whole on their side of the house. What this means is that even if you are happy about certain things, literally all happiness equates the same. You destroy the ability for your brain to literally distinguish between what is the most important and which to remember or which not to. Biologically, on both sides of the house, your brain capacity is the same, but it's only on our side. With those strong emotions and those strong attachments, you're able to actively remind yourself of those moments, and that is why the moment when you die, when you close your eyes, but in eternity, you're able to recall those moments and feel a sense of fulfillment from those things. Your life is comparatively more happy on our side. Lastly, what do we think the rationality and stability in this debate, even though the absolute benefits of government, needs to come secondary to happiness and memories? The first reason for this is rather simple, right? You can get rationality and stability on either side, but it's only in our state of house where you get those happiness because of the fluctuation of the emotions and because of the things you learn from being able to cherish your emotions. But second, realize even if you're the most rational being on your side of house, you are able to be as happy on our side of house. But if you're happy, for example, you can still be rational, you can still be stable to some extent, as what my other framing of my top of speech shows, because of the monotony of their life. But lastly, realize the last reason as why they need to lose this debate is they never defend the comparative as to why, like on your side of the house, literally you're unable to feel happy, even in instances where you need to feel happy. That is why comparative on our side, you lead a much more fulfilling life. Your life is comparatively better side with up.
Thank you for that speech. Now let's call upon government reply to conclude the case on government side. Here.
Hi, just making sure you can hear me again.
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, that's great. My speech starts in 3, 2, 1. I do not have a significant emotional attachment to this tournament, but winning this final will be great. I would not let my self-worth and the belief that I am not defined by one debate trophy is going to make me happier and better as a debater in the long run, right? We will feel sad if we lose, my team and I, but we won't allow that to define us unlike what side opposition proposes. That is the simple truth of the matter, and that is the characterization we brought to you in the beginning of my speech. They try to characterize and strawman our case repeatedly of us only supporting rational choice, only us being robot, cold, heartless individuals. But that has never been what we propose, and because of that, they lose today's debate. What is it that they say that is truly wrong, right? What does opposition would prefer for people in their side of the house, right? But before that, let's establish what people actually face in this world, right? What an average reasonable person will face. We think that what we told you from our government bench is what is the most accurate, right? We told you how strong emotions are pretty common, right? You can recur them for your entire life, especially when the info slide itself talks about jobs, relationships, your friends, your family, people who you counter with every single day in your life. Because of that, what my second speaker told you about microaggressions, how you perceive every little small thing as something that might severely affect you, that is true, right? Because sure, even if you're the average reasonable person, you work a 9 to 5, you work you work every day of your life or something like that, you still feel significant emotional attachment to your work. You still feel the microaggression. So strong emotions still will happen daily, and it's appalling that side opposition still does not support, still doesn't see them. Then they talk about support systems because they want to defend, they want to avoid a world and where consequences from severe loss and severe negative emotions will happen. They say, oh, there will always be people backing your side, always be people. You can go to therapy and what else, right? But let's talk about this. Firstly, an average reasonable person doesn't have much time to go to a therapist, right? When we're talking about the average reasonable person, my first speaker and second speaker has established to you that they are not super poor, they're not super rich, they're the average middle class working individual that doesn't have much time because they need to support their families, they need to support themselves. Because of that, we think the support system innately is really flawed. But moreover, we think that when they do rely on, let's say, other individuals, let's say their families, their friends, for their support systems, because of the significant emotional attachment, when, and this is likely to happen, that these people don't provide the best care necessary, that is exacerbated. That will cause you even more and more harm that you feel on a daily. Because of this, we think that their idea of mitigation fails. But let's talk about peace, right? Let's talk about happiness and how you can still feel emotions. Because we told you already, you can still feel emotions, good or bad, without strong emotional attachment on our side of the house, right? If you find a partner, if we win the help tournament, right, we can still feel great happiness from this thing. We don't have to define it to us, right? Even if we take the best case where these strong things, strong emotional attachments are pretty rare, we think that you still have these situations where people feel like emotions, right? When you do have these sort of high peaks, we don't think that like that is not exclusive, because you can still feel great from these situations. Now, moving on to the idea of rationality, because we think that they really fumbled the bag here. They say, oh, when you have this sort of strong, significant emotional attachment, you have the urgency to change. You can build characters with these sort of emotional attachments, right? But what they fail to recognize is that it is actually when you feel the strongest and significant emotions the most, where you're the most vulnerable to bad things, right? Sure, if you can make a lot of mistakes when you do it, but those are the times where the mistakes are the most vulnerable. Say, when you talk to your family, when you talk to your special partner or whatever, and you say you want to create you want a baby, right? That is when you are vulnerable with your strong emotional attachment. So that is when you have the biggest decisions made. You have the biggest decisions made for your life, and that is when rationality is the most important. You can't just build character afterwards. And we think that when you have the most rational decisions, that just leads to more happiness as well. So at the end of the day, when you're looking back at your life, what do you look at is also the negatives, right? On their side, they're going to be looking back at loss. They're going to be looking back at trauma, not the high points, because that is where what humans focus on the most. That is an undeniable fact. And because of all this, I've never been prouder to propose.
Thank you for that speech. With that speech, it concludes for the final. Thank you for everyone, and the result will be announced at the result announcement. Yeah.